Thanks so much for having me today. I'm looking forward to talking with you all about the new and improved organic acid test from Diagnostic Solutions Laboratory. And just a little bit about me. I've been in clinical practice for over a decade, and I've been studying and practicing herbal medicine for a little over 2 decades here, and been using organic acid urine testing with my patients for over 8 years. So I love studying metabolic health and mitochondrial health, as well as helping my chronically ill patients get well. I do a lot of functional endocrinology as a naturopathic doctor here in Montana, as well as Washington State. And today we'll get into kind of how this test could apply for you and your clinical practice. So hopefully you'll have a lot of fun with me today. And we're going to dive into briefly kind of the foundations of metabolomics, systems biology, organic acids. That could be a little review for some people who are more experienced. But I always like to make sure that we're all on the same page first before we launch into the details and the fun stuff of it. And really, what patients could I order this test for in my practice? Or how is this applicable to me and my clients in my day-to-day functional medicine, integrative medicine practice, of course. So hopefully that comes through loud and clear today. Essentially, the test that important parts that I'm going to cover today, the test is over 70 analytes in the urine, are in particular the Krebs cycle, fatty acid oxidation, dopamine, and the dopamine pathway, as well as dopamine beta hydroxylase enzyme in particular, and what all that means for you and your patients with executive functioning challenges or ADD, and tryptophan pathway as well. So we're going to look at neurotransmitters and mitochondrial health specifically for this case, and there's a lot more to the test. So if you're wondering more about resources from the lab, please do go to diagnosticsolutionsLab.com. And then you're going to click on the navigation bar for tests, go right to organic acid profile. And then we have a interpretive guide here in the middle. It's a PDF download, 44-page, awesome and new and improved interpretive guide, a sample report, and then a product brief there. So those are all PDFs, easily to search. And then you can use those when you order the test. And I recommend ordering the test in yourself first, or maybe a close family member or friend, or a patient that really trusts you and you have good rapport with, so you can learn this if this is new. Regardless if you've done organic acid testing with other labs, this is the, as far as I know, from everything out there, and I've used other tests, is the first new and improved organic acid profile test available in North America in the last 20 years. So based on up-to-date research. So essentially, to zoom out to that 30,000 foot lens, think high level first here, folks, is precision medicine is kind of the lens that we're looking through, systems biology, and we're going for that, bullseye target with our patients, of course. We want that high accuracy, high precision. So here's kind of a visual for you. Low accuracy, low precision. Maybe in that treatment plan and diagnostic plan, the person feels, or the patient feels kind of like, hey, I kind of feel like we're just throwing anything at the wall and seeing what sticks, or some other criticisms. Maybe I feel like I'm taking every supplement under the sun and I don't want to take this many supplements. So this test really can help you separate out what is absolutely necessary with, maybe conventional blood tests. And you can really pinpoint what your patient needs, what is deficient, what is, in excess here. So that's kind of the utility of it in the most simple way. And, what are organic acids? So organic acids are organic compounds biochemically that are acidic and always consist of carbon and hydrogen. And then they can consist of other things in addition: oxygen, nitrogen, sulfur, and phosphorus. And they're really helpful for us because they can help us look at the cellular metabolism on a biochemical level, on a very minutiae level, a detailed level, and combined with some key other tests, which I will mention throughout this, can really tell us what's malfunctioning and needs support here. So on the website, when you do get to that organic acids profile page, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, there are some resources listed. And the first research paper listed in the resources there is this paper, Application of Metabolomics. So it is a great paper, and I've kind of highlighted the first couple sentences of the abstract. And so you don't have to read that right now. You can read the paper later, read the abstract later, and I've summarized it here for you essentially. So metabolomics is basically a comprehensive analysis of these metabolites that our patients are essentially peeing out, and then we're looking at them as these organic acid analytes on a test result. Essentially, there's a lot of hundreds of thousands of metabolites that can be analyzed in maybe research papers and the medical literature and animal and human studies. However, we at the lab have picked the most important analytes from the most up-to-date research for all of you, so you can really have only what you need. And really what we're looking at is the metabolic phenotype and the epigenetic profiling of what's going on here, so you can diagnose and then monitor disease states or functional imbalances in your patients. Maybe they don't have a ICD-10 diagnosis yet. So, if you're thinking, well, if ADD doesn't fit for your patients, how many of your patients have brain fog? How many of your patients forget where they put things? How many of your patients are having problems getting through their workday because they have mental fatigue or can't, organize their life, or have overwhelm, have problems sleeping, insomnia, stuff like that? It's everybody, right? So this test can help so many people with GI map and even sometimes without, in my opinion. So, if you do testing for SNPs, looking at single nucleotide polymorphisms in the genetics, this is your epigenetic profile to go along with that. Look at nutrition. There's environmental toxins that we test, or toxic impacts per se, in this urine test as well. So you're getting a lot here, and really can be a great foundational test in your diagnostic toolkit. And that's when we say urine metabolomics is what we're talking about here. So hopefully that elucidates what we're looking at today and in this test altogether. And of course, we're big on micronutrients. So most of us want to know like what products to give or what supplements and what nutrient deficiencies our patients have and why, and maybe how long to give those things and what dosages. So we'll get into that a bit today as well. And just real high level, there's aspects of those micronutrient deficiencies that most of our patients need help with, maybe certain B vitamins, maybe they have MTRR, MTHFR, SNPs as well. And there's also, amino acids, so N-acetylcysteine, L-carnitine, glycine. We can see if they need those amino acids too, and what macro and micronutrient deficiencies are really showing up here, as well as, to how to help our patients with executive functioning challenges or cognitive health concerns. So you can really go fairly broad and under that category. There's other conditions there too. Mitochondrial and antioxidant function, so you can see what's going on in their mitochondria here. Gut health and toxins, I won't get into those categories because for the sake of time, but we do test those in the urine organic acid profile. So really you're getting a personalized, convenient test report for your patients. And essentially we want this to always be a first morning urine. We need at least 6 hours without any voiding of the bladder. And first morning urine especially as well, because you do measure some of those first morning neurotransmitters as well as cortisol and cortisone. So we have the normal metabolic pathway is A, B, C, D. Here there can be a disruption to the enzyme. This could be gut dysbiosis, toxins. There could be micronutrient deficiencies. The person could, they could be training for an event, around this time of year, a lot of people may be training for like a triathlon and they're super healthy, but you want to help them do, perform better there or perform better in their job and all the other ways. So sometimes we're optimizing, we're not necessarily coming from a chronic illness, chronic fatigue or debilitating situation. So that depends obviously on your patient population. And why test organic acids? I've kind of already talked about this, but in summary, personalized and precise approach, simple and non-invasive. It's a first morning urine. I've had a lot of challenges with my busy patient population for them to get a morning blood draw, fasting blood draw. And maybe you have the similar concerns or issues with getting a blood draw. So this bypasses that issue altogether. They're just going to pee in the cup and send us to the lab, and then we'll help you interpret it. You can schedule consults with myself or other people on the medical education team to go over your results, and I highly recommend that as well. Of course, we talked about nutrient deficiencies, and we'll talk about this more. Vitamin B2 will be something we'll talk about today, the FAD and cofactors there. So comprehensive insights, we're going to go into great detail, especially about neurotransmitters, as mentioned, and improved outcomes and effective treatment monitoring. So you can retest in 3-4 months, possibly sooner, depending on what your interventions are, and see how things are becoming more optimal. I wanted to highlight some myths that I've heard over the years. Like I said, I've been using organic acid testing with my patients for over 8 years. And I think there's a lot of misinformation or misconceptions or myths that I hear kind of whispered in private conversations with practitioners that have been in practice, some of them much longer than me. So one of the first myths that I've heard, and maybe other people have heard, is organic acid testing is only valuable for pediatric inborn errors of metabolism. So a lot of the research that you may read if you go into PubMed about organic acids in the human research is inborn errors of metabolism. And this is kind of an outdated framework of urine metabolomics and urine organic acid testing, and has been inherited into this time period. Essentially, about 28 to 30 years is what we have in the integrative functional medicine community or industry, if you will, of this test. So, we really, I think, need to kind of just let that one go and use new frameworks and updated information. So hopefully that comes through loud and clear today. I know that may be confusing for some folks, but hopefully that's not a myth that folks carry anymore. It's too complex and specific to be useful for general diagnostics. I understand that nutritional biochemistry and biochemistry may be very complex for a lot of us. It definitely takes some time to wrap your head around if it's not something that you've done a lot in the past or don't recall, or maybe you're doing other tests, and to learn a new test is why we're all here today, right? So, or relearn a new and improved test, if you will. So kind of similar to the first myth, it's mostly for kids, not something I'd use with my adult patients. I'd say it can be used for all patients of all ages, and the results are too variable to be reliable for complex cases. I would say actually the opposite. I would say it would be indicated for all complex cases. So essentially, we're going to disregard these old, outdated frameworks and replace them with new ones today and beyond. So I'm briefly going to introduce the new and improved organic acid profile, what's new about it, essentially, and what's unique about it. So first of all, there's a summary page, a summary of functional imbalances dashboard on the front and first pages, and it kind of highlights it in red and yellow and green, telling you, hey, these are the things that you need to pay attention to. We've already summarized the highs and lows for you and what is truly out of balance. Updated nutraceutical insights for actionable results on the final page. So you basically can take those first 1 to 3 pages that are highlighted in orange or yellow and red, and then the last page, and you basically have what you need from the report. And then if you have questions about, of course, schedule a consult with myself or other people on our medical education team here at DSL. But, what's unique about the test in general, we do test urine glucose, D-lactic acid, cortisol and cortisone, microalbumin, fructose, which is great if you want your patients to avoid fructose, which I'm sure we all do. You can see if they're eating that or if it's slipping in and they're not reading labels, which could be overwhelming for new patients to figure that out. Quercetin, maybe you want your patient taking a lot of quercetin, or it was prescribed, or they're just not eating a lot of fruits that, innately have quercetin. Aldosterone and equal, which is a beneficial marker from soy metabolites, so showing up in the urine. And then we have some new ratios. So today we'll talk about the HVA to VMA ratio, kyurinic and quinolinic acid ratio, cortisol, cortisone, as well as some other things around like fungal markers and toxins that we won't talk about today, but will be future educational webinars and classes, et cetera, at the lab. So how to read the report. Essentially, this is based on healthy adults, the ranges, all across the board in industry and organic acid testing. That's what it's based on. And it's basically standardized to creatinine in the urine. So you want to make sure their creatinine is in optimal range. It's a good place to check first in the test, that it's in the green. And then outside the 95 percentile limit is what's going to be marked in the red as high and flagged. And if it's outside the 80th percentile limit, then it's going to be marked as high normal. And on that first dashboard page, it'll be in the orange if it's between the 80 and 94th percentile. So hopefully that makes sense. And then who can benefit? I've kind of already alluded to this, so I'll quickly go over this. Chronic fatigue syndrome. A lot of my patients have chronic fatigue or intermittent fatigue, daytime fatigue. And that's, typically been the #1 reason why people come to integrative medicine practices, unless you're highly specialized and only marketing to one demographic, which very well could be you. And I would say #1 or #2, depending on who you are, a lot of us may just market for like SIBO or bloating, and that's the chronic GI imbalances category. Maybe you're using GI map from DSL, and that's awesome. And you can add this test and get a very comprehensive picture and pretty much have most of what you need. Neurological disorders. So of course, we'll talk about ADD. This could be dementia, memory deficits, neurodegenerative conditions, autism spectrum disorder, et cetera. Essentially any mood disorder here as well. Anxiety, insomnia, depression, which is, most people have anxiety and depression to a degree today, or a very, a mild form thereof. So especially, after the last 4.5 years here in the world. So specifically, if you're not targeting those 4 categories, anyone with toxin exposures, maybe they have fibromyalgia and nutritional imbalances, maybe you have work with athletes and you want them to improve their performance. So what is the methodology of the analysis here at the lab? So we're using tandem mass spec, and it's high sensitivity and specificity. So we're really able to get consistent results that's trustworthy for you and your patients. And we're testing, as mentioned, multiple organic acids at once and giving a full view of what's going on in the body's cellular metabolism. So hopefully that is reassuring for you all. And then understanding the percentiles and quintiles. So the test report is reported out in quintiles. So you have, 20 and then 40, 60, 80, 100. And that basically is going to help you separate things out. Obviously, it's color coded as well, unless you print it out in like a grayscale. But when you get the report yourself, it will be a PDF document ordered from the lab, and you'll be able to look at these percentages and kind of understand what's going on. So we help you kind of separate out the highs and lows, as mentioned. So it really takes out, I think, a lot of the guesswork here. And using organic acids in your clinic. So, again, a little bit more, if you're having concerns about reading the report and still feeling like you need a lot more, I definitely would get the interpretive guide and look through that. I often, and this is the new improved interpretive guide for the new improved test. So 44 pages right off the website. And the test does have these 5 core sections that are important to be aware of. Of course, we're going to go over the energy and mitochondrial processing and nutrition today in quite a bit of detail, and the neurotransmitters as mentioned, but it does go down into the toxic impacts and microbial metabolites as well. So if you're, maybe you're very focused on gut health or environmental medicine and you want to have that data, you will get that data from here. So it's good to be aware of the high level things that we're looking at, and energy and mitochondrial processing. So as mentioned, we do look at all of these and all the different cofactors that can help you put together a treatment plan that's, as mentioned, very specific. So what vitamin cofactors are necessary and kind of why, right? So maybe they're already taking B vitamin, B complex, maybe they're already taking magnesium and glycine, and you can kind of see what else might be missing. A lot of different nutrients are listed here, of course, biotin, polyphenols, very important for all of us to keep those antioxidants level up. And more specifically, what is helpful for the brain? So optimizing brain health, of course, is kind of the high level key here at a nutritional brain chemistry, gut-brain chemistry support, and what is going to really help support people to focus and keep their attention and cognitive health through their whole life. But in this case, this is an adult case, but it could be applied to any age and any gender. So, you may be looking at specific nutrients, vitamin B1, B5, of course, folate, methylated folate is, a lot of people have a lot of knowledge about that and how it could help serotonin and dopamine. Acetyl-carnitine and or carnitine is great for focus in the brain and ADHD and ADD. And then vitamin C for adrenaline and catecholamine support, as well as B6, B3. There's so many great nutrients. So we'll get into those details. Magnesium, most people, as you all probably know, are deficient in magnesium and zinc, and a lot of people have iron deficiency. So how does that play into brain function and focus? So hopefully we'll dive into this in our case study. So in today's case study, we have an adult male who has problems focusing, and hopefully the humor comes through. Basically, his name's Drax. If you've seen Guardians of the Galaxy, if you haven't, you probably should. In my opinion, I'm a fan, of course. So Drax is a 47-year-old male, spends his nights playing video games and banging on the cowbell too much in the man cave, and his wife is beyond overwhelmed by this and doesn't know what to do. So it's affecting his marriage and his work life. Can't focus at work, and then stays up too late because he's having problems going to bed and relaxing and coming down from the work day because he has to drink tons of coffee to get through the day and focus. And he's also kind of at his wit's end because his goal, his motivating reason is he does not want to take medication to focus during his work day because he will not be able to get a pilot's license. Just in case you all don't work with ADD patients, some of my male patients, this is a true story for them. They really want to get their pilot's license in adulthood, yet they've been diagnosed with ADD or ADHD, and they take medicine to focus during the workday or don't and try to get through the day, similar to Drax. But with FAA rules, as of August 30th last year, you're required at least 4 years or more of being medication-free and asymptomatic to qualify. So that can be a long time for people like Drax and my other patients. So we really want to help him. Of course, typical scenario, or maybe not typical if you don't work with a lot of men, but his wife is saying, hey, please come work with this integrative medicine practitioner, which is you. And, basically before we get into kind of how you're going to help him with this test and the treatment plan, we want to look at common signs and symptoms of the, ADD and attentive type, because most of us may be familiar with ADHD. So careless mistakes, overlooking details, making errors maybe in work and other areas of our life, difficulty sustaining attention that may be obvious, easily distracted. So maybe can't even get through a conversation or a live webinar like this for a whole hour, easily distracted at work and in personal life everywhere. Incomplete tasks, so starting things and then leaving them unfinished, which is also driving Drax's wife up the wall because he's not completing anything in the house. He starts fixing something and then he starts fixing something else and nothing's really getting done. Disorganized, so probably has a pretty unclean living area and office space if he is going to work or working from home. Forgetting things, so maybe forgets to show up to events with the family or appointments, and then easily distracted by small stimuli. So if there's a lot of noise, or going to work with an open office floor plan is driving him bonkers. So, and then losing important items. So that's also a common thing. I also want to highlight the differential diagnosis for you. On the right is an image of a Venn diagram that would probably give most of us anxiety, but essentially there's a lot of overlap here with other things. So if you're thinking, well, I don't work with ADHD or ADD, but I work with other things, my patient has depression or anxiety, or they used to abuse substances. Maybe they had a learning disability in their childhood and you're working with them in adulthood, and no one's kind of unpacked that executive functioning that is still impacting their life. Thyroid disorders, hyperthyroidism should be ruled out here on the differential list, as well as post-concussive syndrome. So you can have a post-concussive syndrome that walks and talks similar to ADD and ADHD, and maybe they didn't have this their whole life. So it's good to take a good history, make sure you ask the right questions in your intake forms, and throughout time really get to know our patients and understand what's impacting their life and how we can make a lasting support for them, regardless of what they come to see you with. So if it's a gut health concern or something else, or maybe it's high cholesterol, high blood pressure, what have you, this could still be applicable. So again, nutrient deficiencies, we'll get into this in more detail, but with ADD, these are common, or ADHD, these are common things that you may find on urine organic acid testing. So this is a good slide to kind of like put an asterisk on and think, okay, well, this person said they had brain fog. So what's going on with their lactate level or their fatty acid oxidation? What's going on there? They can't focus at work. So really looking at those things in more detail. And we're going to talk a lot about the dopamine and serotonin as well here. So, and then the gut-brain axis, we do address that with GI map. You can really dive into that deep with your patients. So, well, let's kind of give an overview here real quick. Krebs cycle. So we'll be looking at some of these metabolites, and this is going to really obviously help you get your patients to have more cellular energy, but also pinpoint where in the pathways possibly or most likely things are being caught up or prevented to move forward. So basically I would look at this. This is from our interpretive guide, and start conceptualizing like, okay, well, there's something going on in the cell, there's something going on in the mitochondria that is preventing this person from being able to have the energy and the life that they want to have. They're coming with maybe SIBO or with brain fog, or they have bloating or diarrhea with brain fog or something like that, and you're already using GI map or other tests, or they already have hypothyroidism. So what can we see here? Because it's going to help every cell in their body improve regardless of the diagnosis or the label that people either think they have or they actually do have. So for Drax, we saw that his succinic acid, succinic dehydrogenase, SDH enzyme, was not moving forward to fumarate. And that, obviously it's very high level found in his urine here, and we want it, well below 260. So cofactors that we would want to look at would be antioxidants, or support here would be antioxidants. CoQ10 is a big one. Potentially iron, because actually succinic acid dehydrogenase is an iron sulfur enzyme. So if someone has iron deficiency anemia, you run a CBC in an iron panel and a ferritin, you're thinking, well, maybe they're vegetarian, or they just stopped eating red meat because they thought it was horrible for them, or they can't digest it, which could be a common concern. Then, how are you going to help this enzyme? How are you going to get the iron level up? And then vitamin B6 is a big one, and magnesium. So those are all cofactors to consider with them, and we'll talk about how to differentiate which one is most helpful. We also have the fatty acid oxidation pathway. So it's going to help with focus and attention and mental energy. So if someone does have brain fog, I've had patients that were doing the keto diet and ketogenic diet, and that's potentially really helpful for a lot of neurological concerns and brain fog and post-concussive stuff, ADD, ADHD. However, if their mitochondria aren't able to get that into their system to make ATP from with the fatty acids, they're going to have problems. So here at the top, we have outer mitochondrial membrane. So this is inside the cell. And basically you have L-carnitine, which is a shuttle, kind of like a tugboat, pulling in these long chain fatty acids into the mitochondria so you can make ATP and they can have that cellular energy that all of us need and want. And essentially what we're looking at here, once you get down to the more medium chain fatty acids, are these metabolites. For Drax, in his result, he had these three medium chain fatty acids that were out of balance. They were all high. And the main cofactor here is vitamin B2. So that's the FAD, and that's going to really help, as well as carnitine. So if you're wondering, like, well, how do we know that? It tells you right on the summary of functional imbalances on the top of the report. So you barely even need to go into the middle of the report, but I would recommend it as well. And then, of course, the interpretive guide can help you kind of separate out more of this details. But essentially, vitamin B2 and maybe they're already taking a B complex, but they still need vitamin B2, or they need more of it. And that also helps with a lot of other things in the body. So that's going to help move this through. And with carnitine, he should be focusing a lot better once those are replaced. So this is probably one of my favorite parts of the test, and one of the parts I think is arguably, in this case, the most important, or the core of it, if you will, the meat and potatoes of it. And it's all about dopamine and focus and attention and reward. So when you look at the catecholamine pathways, or on the test, phenylalanine pathways, how it's kind of listed, is we have phenylalanine being converted to tyrosine and eventually DOPA and then dopamine. And dopamine then has to be cleared out to norepinephrine and through DOPAC to HVA. And then norepinephrine is converted through the CMT enzyme and adenosylmethionine and MAO enzymes to VMA. So if you test SNPs, you can test the CMT enzyme and the MAO enzyme. It's pretty easy saliva test to do, as well as looking at what cofactors are needed here. So that could be magnesium and B2 again, and then we have copper and vitamin C for the dopamine beta hydroxylase. So you're wondering, what is important here? What do we need to separate out? And I was talking about iron earlier in my live class last week. Someone asked about iron and this pathway. Here it's kind of maybe hard to see, but you could circle this as well as dopamine. We have iron as a cofactor to get down to these metabolites as well. So you may have listened to Dr. Robert Sapolsky, PhD neuroscientist and author from Berkeley, and he's written a lot of books, more recently other books, but he has an older book called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. It's a great book about kind of the neuroendocrine system and HPA axis dysregulation. But more recently, he's been talking more about dopamine and how dopamine is not about the pursuit of happiness, but the happiness of pursuit. So it's about the hunt. It's about, the journey, the destination is kind of the elusive, pot of gold at the end of the rainbow that always keeps disappearing on the mirage of the horizon, if you will. So that's what dopamine is about. And we're a dopamine kind of over the top culture. Westernized culture is all about dopamine. All the social media apps, video games. Drax is playing video games, so he has this dopamine pathway that genetically or and constitutionally is a little bit different, and that's okay. So we just want to support that with him. And overview, it's obviously a neurotransmitter in the brain in the catecholamine family, precursor to adrenaline and noradrenaline. And it's also the other precursors are tyrosine and before that phenylalanine. So I've had patients who are drinking like 3 cans of diet soda every morning and a 6-pack of beer every night. So what's going on with their dopamine and other neurotransmitters, right? They're self-medicating, so there's no judgment there. It's like, well, let's follow that. Let's support them in healthy ways. If they're, I've had patients who are drinking a pot and a half of coffee a day. So obviously they need support with their dopamine. Maybe they used to smoke cigarettes or still do, or are using nicotine and other ways to focus during their workday. So things to think about there. But it's very crucial for movement in the body and kind of movement through our lives and motivation. I would call it like a motivation neurotransmitter. I'm not going to belabor this slide too much. You all have the slides. But if you want to dive down into all the other things dopamine does, a lot of the research around dopamine is like what's going on with the degradation of substantia nigra in the brain with Parkinson's disease. And there's other research and stuff that is kind of outside the content of today's class. But for the sake of time, I'm going to kind of just skip over this. But it's all the things it does in the body. It reduces insulin production, increases sodium excretion and urine output, inhibits norepinephrine release, acts as a vasodilator. So that's very good because we have more oxygen to our body. So his results showed a high, for Drax, showed a high HVA and high VMA. And that's going to be problematic because we need this pathway to move forward. So he needs support with his dopamine beta hydroxylase enzyme. And so we can support him with magnesium and vitamin B2. And then again, if you do the step testing, you can test for CMT and MAO and check out those enzymes. And that would probably be the lowest hanging fruit, would be to also give copper and vitamin C. So there's this research paper in the International Journal of Biomedical Science here on DBH, its cofactors, which are copper and vitamin C. So if there's more oxidative stress, which we do test for on the test, then maybe you need to give them more vitamin C than just like 500 milligrams that may be in a multivitamin, or 250 milligrams. Maybe they need more there, spread throughout the day, or liposomal. And also copper. So you could check red blood cell copper levels as well before. You don't want to overdose your patient on copper. So typical dose of copper for adults, since our patient's an adult, is 10,000 micrograms a day between food and supplements. So you want to stay under that. And then usually you take all minerals with food. Copper on an empty stomach can make people feel kind of nauseous like zinc can. And then copper and zinc compete with each other. So you want to keep those balanced. And a lot of people have zinc, been taking a lot of zinc over the last 4 years plus because of, the pandemic and whatnot. And their copper is low now. So it suppressed their copper nutritionally. And that's, something that you could help them with. Maybe they have low motivation now. So, or other symptoms that also we've been maybe misguided for the last 30 plus years by the pharmaceutical companies and whatnot, thinking that all depression is a serotonin deficiency. Well, a lot of people have dopamine pathway issues, just like Drax, and they need the copper and vitamin C and other key supports there with magnesium. And maybe they can lower their dose of an antidepressant, or makes the antidepressant work better. Of course, be careful there. You don't want to combine things to give them serotonin syndrome if you're adding like 5-HTP or tryptophan with SSRI. But here we have the interpretive guide here with the high VMA, HVMA, and VMA ratio. So you can read through that. But essentially, we're looking at, as mentioned, copper and vitamin C repletion. And then more detail around it here with the HVA levels being high and why that may be. This is literally what the interpret guide looks like when you download it from the site. And then probable impacts. So, basically high VMA is indicating increased dopamine turnover. In rare cases, Mengs syndrome, if you have a HVA to VMA ratio, that range is 4 to 69. So if you see those conditions, it's super rare, but I don't. And then other things to consider is quercetin and some other key things like green tea, turmeric. If someone's eating a ton of bananas and olives within like 12 hours or 12, 24 hours of collection, I don't know, maybe they ate all the banana bread or something, and because they're craving sugar the night before. Olives, mentioned olive oil and excess potentially could affect HbA. So if you're kind of scratching your head what and why your patient has a result, this slide could be a good resource for you. So something to consider. And then we have tryptophan, serotonin pathway. As mentioned, stress, insomnia, depression, anxiety, pretty common today. And in particular, we're going to look at one metabolite, the 5-HIAA for serotonin turnover. And Drax has some issues that we want to support around that with his pathway with tryptophan breakdown and clearance. So it's non-detectable. So what does that mean? If it was high, we would give vitamin B3 if it was up in the high normal. But since it's low, what do we do? So basically, also first morning urine is correlating with the 24-hour urine for this metabolite. So I thought that was important to highlight. But when it's very low, undetectable level, less than DL, it's not able to be measured at all. We're looking at a serotonin turnover issue and needing a lot of support. So 5-HTP supplementation would be very helpful for him, or similar support nutritionally. So coping mechanisms in our ADHD patients or ADD patients, what's helping, what's hurting. I've seen, like I mentioned, patients use like maybe nicotine gum to focus. Maybe they feel like, as they get older, their job is not secure, so they need to really up their game, and they only can have so much coffee. So now they're chewing on nicotine gum in the final hours of their day. I've seen that quite a bit clinically, as well as stimulants. So, of course, medications for ADD, Ritalin, Adderall, Vyvanse. But yeah, I mean, some people need this, but this will alter your result. So that's something for you to be aware of when you do test your patients, figuring out, this should be in your intake with them, what medications they're taking. Tyrosine supplementation, overuse could be overstimulating, especially if that HbA to VMA ratio is off. You don't want to just dump tyrosine on somebody and give them tons of like mucunapurines or something like that, or rhodiola to help them focus. It could be overstimulating and maybe cause anxiety, and then they can't focus because of that. So diet soda, I talked about that a little bit. It has phenylalanine in it typically, and some of these energy drinks do too. So if your patient's consuming those, without shaming them, kind of figure out why. Spent a lot of time in Seattle, almost 2 decades, and became a coffee connoisseur myself. I love coffee and caffeine. I think it, for a lot of people, could be very helpful in the right dose. However, if your patient's overdosing, that's going to kind of whack out their neuroendocrine system and can cause other problems, obviously, in their sympathetic nervous system and worsening their overall health. So, the poison is in the dose, or the dose is in the poison, so to speak, as Paracelsus said. So some people have it's a 50-50 roughly. Some people have slow metabolism of caffeine, other people have a really fast metabolism. So you may be wondering, like, okay, well, I did an organic acid test, but Dr. Sam talked about all these other things that be going on with my patient, or I don't work with ADD patients. What other tests should I be looking at? I did talk about GI map, of course, from DSL. I do believe that with conventional blood testing and maybe some other tests with hormones, as mentioned on the slide, and SNPs, that GI map and urine organic acid testing is pretty much going to help 98 to 99% of all patients that most functional medicine practitioners see. With that said, it is prudent to mention other things. So if you are specializing in environmental medicine like I do, and mold testing, God bless you, it's hard, but those patients will need potentially other tests. So this is not, this is a starting point. However, this is not a substitute thereof. So just to be transparent, you would want to then do a urine mold mycotoxin test or other tests like immunoglobulin test for mold, if that is what you do. So, or if the patient is not improving with your plan. I did talk about red blood cell minerals, so copper, zinc, magnesium, molybdenum. There's cofactors listed on a test for those. So you'd want to, look at those minerals in iron panel, CBC, your kind of conventional tests. You can look at anion gap and GGT for glutathione, and we also show you glutathione in the organic acid test. So all this is listed here, and if you do order red blood cell copper, you usually want to use test ceruloplasma as well as the protein for iron transport, and then your complete thyroid panel. So we did talk about hyperthyroidism being a rule out, but I don't see a lot of hyperthyroidism in my practice because they probably go to their endocrinologist mostly, and in the places that I practice first. Also, I've seen people with like narcolepsy, sleep apnea, and ADHD, so it's not an either or thing here. I think keep in mind that they could still need a sleep study and that will save their life. So do refer out when it is not your specialty for environmental medicine or sleep studies, especially very important. And then, kind of what is our plan here? So like, let's put it all together. So we talked about his results, a summary of his findings were fatty acid oxidation, needing support there with vitamin B2 and carnitine. We had the Krebs cycle, mitochondrial support, CoQ10, B2 again, is a theme here in antioxidants. So he's really deficient there, which a lot of people are, especially what I see in I just looked at a urine organic acid test of a patient who actually, he also has ADD diagnosed and prescribed medication and needs antioxidants. So very common that we're deficient in those. And in the diet. So dopamine story, we talked a lot about this. We want to support with cofactors, magnesium, B2, copper, and vitamin C. Obviously, as humans, we don't make vitamin C. We're not goats, right? So too bad. That would be cool if we did, but we don't. So make sure your patients are getting the right form and taking, especially as we move into the fall and winter, enough vitamin C and to support their dopamine clearance and pathways. And then tryptophan, so we have 5-HTP is our solution here for less, undetectable levels of this 5-HIAA marker. So basically, here's your more in-depth summary of our action plan with some research. So if you love research and want to look at the PMID numbers, you can look them up on PubMed. For carnitine, the typical starting dose would be 500 milligrams of L-carnitine powder or another source, liposomal or otherwise, you can get. So eating more red meat if you're okay with your patient eating red meat. And then L-carnitine you can go up. So L-carnitine you can do, like maybe do 1,000 milligrams morning and noon. And then L-carnitine up to almost 3 grams. But some people, just be aware, some people may need carnitine, but if you go too high, they may have anxiety or feel overstimulated. So it'd be something to kind of track with your patients and kind of let them know, like, hey, don't go too overboard with that. And then there are, mutations where people have issues with over excreting carnitine and stuff like that. So let's kind of explain it to my patients, like, hey, you may just have a constitution that gets rid of carnitine too fast. So we need to figure out how to optimize this. Copper, yes, you can give supplements. There's multivitamins with copper through different companies, or a multi-mineral that has copper and zinc and other things that are great for people. Most of us are really deficient in a lot of minerals. Beef, bison, or elk liver, pistachios or pumpkin seeds, and can be good sources from food. So I've listed some food sources here. Obviously, you can look up other food sources, but these are kind of like the more high concentration food sources that are from more of a Mediterranean-like diet, omnivore diet, and some vegetarian options. So Of course, if your patient has issues with, things like oxalates, don't give them spinach, but it is mentioned here for B2. And that was a big theme for them, for DRAX, to get more fish and meat and eggs. So 15 to 30 milligrams is a pretty good starting dose. And of course, the 5-HTP, there's a lot of depression and problems with insomnia, as mentioned, and mood-wise. And people who do have to take the stimulants, sometimes they have a hard time sleeping and a hard time with appetite. So 5-HTP could be part of that solution. Not mentioned, additionally, would be like a liposome or chewable L-theanine during the day, or just have them drink a lot of green tea, because it does need that antioxidants, as mentioned. And then magnesium L-threonate, there's research about how that crosses the blood-brain barrier. Apparently that's being potentially refuted now, but for the sake of simplification, 1 to 2 grams or magnesium, different magnesiums together to bowel tolerance multiple times a day, and then foods that are high in magnesium. So avocados, Swiss chard, pumpkin seeds, again, dark chocolate at lunchtime for focus could be really helpful. Maybe dark chocolate covered almonds, that would be a win. So we talked about a lot today. Real quick to review, we have a broad diagnostic utility with the urine organic acid testing for your practice here through DSL. And it's a very integrative tool, can really work in conjunction with other tests you already do, and cost efficient. So the test is, more cost efficient than a lot of other organic acid tests out there today on the market, under $250. And adult applicable, obviously, as mentioned, neurotransmitters, chronic illness, energy needs for the gut, brain, and mood, and all the things we talked about. And interpretive variability, so variations of results reflective of the metabolic dynamics going on in your patient and what they're eating and doing day to day. So hopefully that helps you give more personalized and precision plans for your patients. So you can order the test here off the website. Just go to the website, and then you're going to click on the test drop down, and you can scroll to where it says order now, and the big red button. That's exactly how it looks. And then you can order your test for yourself or your patients. Thanks so much for having me today.